Hey everyone, Snulch here. You probably don't need me to tell you that Hollow Knight is one of the most beloved and respected indie games to ever be released. Created by a small team of 3 guys and a composer living in Adelaide, Australia, the game rose from its humble beginnings as Hungry Knight, a silly little test game released on good old Newgrounds.com, to essentially become a renowned masterpiece that is synonymous with the Metroidvania genre. That's not to say that it's objectively the best Metroidvania ever made. There are plenty of incredible bangers in that genre, and it comes down to taste. But somehow it seems Hollow Knight has clawed its way to the top of the pile,
Really?
taking its place alongside Metroid and Castlevania as the poster child of the entire genre. And if you disagree, don't take my word for it, just look at the internet. You Google Metroidvania games and there's Hollow Knight right at the top of the list. Its ratings are simply through the roof, topping out other titans of the category like Blasphemous, Axiom Verge, and even Metroid Dread itself. Practically every article written about Metroidvanias, from Kotaku to Games Radar to Nintendo Life, all prominently feature the Knight front and center on the banner. Just about everyone who plays it simply adores it, and even now, years after its release, it's still just as relevant as ever. It has a thriving online community, YouTube videos about this game are still pulling hundreds of thousands of views, and its loyal and devoted fan base have continued to buzz about all things Hollow Knight year after year, as they maintained their undying vigil for its fabled sequel, Silksong, which is now coming out in just a few days. Holy sh**. But yeah, all told, Hollow Knight is generally seen as nothing short of video game royalty. So this naturally leads to the question, why? Why is Hollow Knight so successful? And the answer to that question is, why the fuck wouldn't it be? Just about every aspect of this game's design is as close to perfection as I can think of. Right off the bat, the art style and aesthetic of this game is so striking and unique, it dazzles the senses. The graphics are fully composed of beautiful hand-drawn backgrounds and assets and animations that are brimming with character and vibrance and personality, and the voice acting is just incredible. How could you not love that? The characters in this game are so cool, so awesome, so lovable. But enough of that soft shit, let's talk gameplay. This shit is just insane. You see, some games have amazing platforming but basic combat, other games have amazing combat but troubled platforming. Hollow Knight has perfect combat, and it's also a perfect platformer. The controls are just tight as a kite, fluid, seamless, flowing with beauty and grace. When you hit an enemy with the nail, it just goes that sound effect, so crispy, so juicy. The platforming as well, my god, you've got the wall jump, the dash, the blast, and the late game has these platforming challenges that are just incredible, right up there with games like Mario, Celeste, and Super Meat Boy. And to polish this off, Hollow Knight delivers, man. It delivers a massive world full of history and lore and upgrades and secrets to be uncovered, so many unique enemies and bosses, characters, upgrades, and lore, and it's all capped off by Christopher Larkin's amazing fairy tale-like musical score. And when this all clicks together, it can only result in one of the most consistently good and enjoyable games on the fucking market. This game is a beast, it's a miracle, and it's insane that such a small team made a game of this scale and quality. So, with that all being said, what I'm about to say may come as a shock to many of you. I hope you're sitting down, take a deep breath, maybe pour yourself a whiskey or something. Okay, there are people out there who don't like Hollow Knight. I know, I was just as surprised as you are when I first heard the news, but it's true, these people are out there. They live in cold pits and crevices on the outskirts of the land, biding their time, thinking coldly and cruelly about how much they don't like Hollow Knight, making grim conspiracies in their caves and mountain huts. And while they are of course entitled to their opinion, we can't let them get away with that without a fight. So in this video, I'm going to go through some of the arguments they've used against this game and rebuttal them as best I can. After gritting my teeth through numerous blasphemous attacks on Hollow Knight, I've realized that most of the issues people have with this game can be narrowed down into 5 main arguments, so I'll tackle each of them one by one. As I go through, I will be fair and give credit where credit's due, since no game is perfect, and some of the arguments do make valid points. Also, unless it's very relevant to a particular point I'm making, I'll generally avoid calling out specific critics by name, and will mostly be responding to all of them as a collective whole, like a feral hive mind of sorts. But I'll link a few of the more notable critiques in the description, which I highly recommend checking out if you want to see the more anti-Hollow Knight perspective. The funny thing is, normally when you're defending a game, you're the underdog. Like, most people hate the game and you're trying to stick up for it. But in this case, most people love Hollow Knight, and those who spit upon it are really just a small minority. So I'm not the underdog. No, today, I'm the big dog. Woof woof, bitch. I'm hunting these critics down and taking them to town because I love Hollow Knight and slander will not be tolerated. Alright, long ass intro's over, let's rock and roll. To kick things off, probably the most prominent critique I often see about this game is concerning its atmosphere. The argument goes that Hollow Knight, despite the fact that it has a massive map and takes well over 20 hours to beat, is severely lacking in variety because most of the game maintains a dark, somber, solemn tone that never really shifts or evolves as the game goes on. This criticism is completely fair and seems valid at a surface level, but I disagree with it in this case for quite a few reasons actually. Now I want to start by saying that normally I'm the type of guy who would agree with this sort of argument, because I really value variety in the games I play. If you've seen my critique of Metroid Prime Echoes, one of my issues with it as a sequel is that the game starts to feel bland and lifeless as it drags on, with too much time spent slogging through this repetitive dark world. Look at Zelda games, Mario games, they take you all over the world. Snowy mountains, vast deserts, tropical islands. You know you're getting a cornucopia of love when you play those games, and this really enhances the sense of adventure. Look at Dark Souls. You slug through the mud in Blight Town, this dirty, filthy, infested swamp of piss and shit. If the whole game was like this, it would be a slog. But then you kill that spider, ring that bell, and it's up to Anor Londo, the city of the gods. The game has movements, the environments are always changing to keep the world fresh. But let's now suppose Hollow Knight did something like this. You just got through the deep nest, you've been slugging through the muck, then you kill this boss and suddenly emerge in a bright, sunny, tropical beach area. And you'd be like, oh shit, what's this? What's this? This is crazy! And it would also suck. Yeah, it would suck. It would be a fun visual surprise for a few seconds, but it would really hurt the game thematically. Hollow Knight takes place underground in the subterranean ruins of an ancient civilization that's been completely destroyed by a supernatural, dream-eating plague, decaying slowly with the long, cold, cruel passage of time. And one thing I love about it is how consistent it is with this theme of solitude and loss. You're exploring the ruins of Hallownest, an underground, labyrinthine city past its prime, so just about everything you see and experience is showing you that this place is deplorable now. It's a fucking infested mess. That's the whole point of the game, and that consistency is important. You just know whenever you boot up Hollow Knight what you're gonna get, a sort of cozy, melancholy experience set in a world of deep, sprawling caves and underground lakes. It suits the game because at its core, you're basically a bug crawling into an anthill and finding a gloomy, ruined city underneath. Now, you might say the same could be said for Metroid Prime Echoes, that the dark and repetitive environments suit the game thematically. But this brings me to the second part of my rebuttal, which is that I disagree that there's even monotony here in the first place. In my opinion, despite the whole game sticking to a sort of damp and dark tone, Hollow Knight's world still hits the player with more than enough variety to keep them engaged all the way through. The idea that just because the game has a cold and dark color palette means it's lacking in variety is, in my opinion, completely off base. For example, Neril, one of my favorite YouTubers when he's not blasting Hollow Knight, criticized Hollow Knight for being boring and bland, and I noticed some people in the comments saying that Axiom Verge in particular has a much better atmosphere because it's colorful and lush, while Hollow Knight is just kinda sad and ugly. And it is true that Axiom Verge is more colorful and vibrant, but here's the funny thing, and I'm speaking from personal, anecdotal experience here. I've beaten Axiom Verge 3 times. I love that game. Awesome Metroidvania, super fun, great weapons and upgrades, one of the most badass soundtracks of all time. I beat that shit thrice. And yet, for whatever reason, I don't remember a single area in that game. I don't remember the names of the different areas, I don't remember specific rooms or challenges, I don't really remember the level design, and I don't even really remember many of the boss fights. I've beaten this game more times than I have Hollow Knight, and yet none of the areas really stand out to me except for 1 or 2 cool outdoor areas, and that one area where the lady is singing in that weird voice. Now on the other hand, prior to replaying it to make this video, I had only actually played Hollow Knight once, back when it came out like 7 years ago. And despite its much more gloomy color palette, I remembered everything about this game. Everything. All these years later, and I still remembered every single area in this game because they're so infused with detail and thematic elements that make them all unique. I remembered how the knight jumps off a cliff at the start and you find yourself in the village of Dirtmouth, this lonely, gloomy town sitting under a wide open black sky, tucked away at the edge of the world where nobody goes. Then you jump down into the Forgotten Crossroads, a haunting symphony of strings playing softly in the distance as you make your way through this maze of abandoned platforms and broken elevators. It gives the impression that this used to be a busy place of hustle and bustle, but now there's not a soul left around. Then the green path blew my fucking nuts off when I first played this game. It suddenly opens up into a lush area full of plant life and vegetation with this beautiful, almost Disney-like music and flowers blooming everywhere and these knights attacking from the bushes. And tell me, sweet viewer, who could forget the fungal wastes where the music is like boom, 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 these little staccato cello notes, which is genius because the plucked strings have this bouncy sound that perfectly complements the night bouncing off of these mushrooms. This is the bouncy area. I remembered finding the mantis village where you fight your way through these hostile and dangerous mantises who come to respect you after you defeat their 3 queens. One of the most iconic Metroidvania boss fights of all time, by the way. The Deep Nest. Oh, the Deep Nest. Getting trapped in these tight, claustrophobic tunnels while surrounded by worms and spiders and constantly hearing the scuttling of creepy insects. This shit gave me the creeps. In the west, you have the Queen's Gardens, a regal stretch of botanical beauty that hasn't lost its charm as the rest of Hallownest fell into decay. Then in the east, you've got Crystal Peak, where these miners mindlessly toil for ore as you climb up and up, dashing through the air, dodging fucking lasers and shit. Back to the west, you got the Howling Cliffs. I remember pissing my pants. I repeat, I pissed my pants when I saw how the game loops back to that cliff that the knight jumps off at the start, brings it full circle. But then back in the east, you got the Resting Grounds, a cemetery haunted by the regretful ghosts of fallen warriors, where an old crone lingers alone and helps you discover the secret of dreams. The Fog Canyon has these exploding jellyfish honing in on you and chasing you all over the place. The Kingdom's Edge, one of my favorite areas in the game by far, just this remote expanse of ash on the outskirts of the Old Kingdom, with this sweeping orchestral score playing as the husks and corpses of dead bugs endlessly fall from the sky. And then you find out where they're falling from. There's this derelict coliseum where many travelers make their home to indulge in the thrill of the games. The royal waterways underground, the ancient basin, the beehive, the abyss. Holy fuck, man! For a game that people love to criticize for being boring and repetitive and having no atmosphere, it seems like there's a lot going on here to me. Because here's the thing, right? Shut up. Here's the thing, okay? It's true, Hollow Knight doesn't have too much variety in its atmosphere or too much color. Axiom Verge has more colors, okay? I admit it. But that's not the only way to have a compelling atmosphere in a video game. And as somebody who, again, generally prefers lots of variety and lush visuals in games, Hollow Knight actually proved me wrong. It convinced me through its hauntingly beautiful world that sometimes it's best for a game to be somber, quiet, and wistful all the way through. And even after all this talk, I still haven't even mentioned the masterpiece of this game yet, the most iconic location in the entire game, the City of Tears. Holy cowabunga. This area has one of the most distinct atmospheres in the game, and quite possibly one of the greatest songs ever put to a video game, which says a lot, but I stand by it. Christopher Larkin hauled ass when making the music for this place. When you first get here, you meet another adventurer named Quirrell sitting on a bench. He tells you that you're looking down upon the ruins of the capital and ponders to himself about the mysteries of its past. What happened here that caused the city to fall to ruin? Why is this water perpetually falling from the sky? Where's the source? He's a curious little guy, and you can just sit here and chill with him and forget your worries for a while. Arriving at the City of Tears is an iconic moment in gaming history. After talking to Quirrell, you go downstairs and enter the capital, finally see the core of this lost civilization drowning in perpetual rain. And all the while, this insane harp melody just washes over you. It's so nostalgic and beautiful, it can almost make a grown man weep. Not me though, obviously, not me. So full of loss and sorrow. As you explore the city, you see that its once proud soldiers and royal guards have all gone mad. You see the empty libraries with books scattered on the floor, its deranged citizens roaming around maniacally, driven insane by lust and greed. Then you find this telescope that allows you to look out over the city from another perspective. I don't know why, but this shot is so beautiful to me. It's just so bleak, so empty looking, like this place used to be something, man. Then you go down to the middle of the city and see a monument to the Hollow Knight. You don't know who this bug was, but there's the statue just standing there, and you look upon it as the rain falls, and the city looms quietly behind you as the music just swells.
Well, actually, the game is lacking in the atmosphere department. It needs more variety and color. It doesn't have any colors. It needs better atmosphere, more variety. The atmosphere sucks.
Like, really? Man, get the out of here. The next critique has to do with Hollow Knight's upgrade system. Specifically, I've seen a lot of people complain about the charms. Charms are a type of upgrade in Hollow Knight that are the rewards for certain side quests and areas. Each one gives you some new ability, like a magic spell or increased health or regeneration speed or something, but you can only have a certain amount of them equipped at any given point in time. Whenever you rest at a bench, you can change your loadout of equipped charms before setting off into the world. You can also increase the total amount of charms you can carry as the game goes on by finding additional slots called notches. Some of these critics think this is a bad system as you find upgrades that you can't use all the time, and they feel like a lot of the charms aren't really useful. And honestly, of all the critiques I'm going to rebuttal, this is the one I understand the least. Maybe I'm stupid or something, but I simply have no idea what people are complaining about here. I just don't get it. I always really liked this system. I think the charms are sweet. You know, in Zelda, you can do this long, grueling side quest to get yet another heart container or Korok seed. In Metroid, you could bust your chops solving a Shine Spark puzzle and just get a missile expansion or something. But in Hollow Knight, if you go out of your way to do something, you'll often find a new charm. There are 45 of these things in the game, and each one gives you an entirely new ability or buff. They're not always useful, and you can't equip all of them at once, but that's the whole point. You need to decide which ones you like the most, build your own little custom loadout, and maybe change it up if a certain situation calls for it. For example, if you need more money, there's a charm that makes Geo, this game's currency, fly towards you. Pretty useful, but what are you willing to sacrifice for it? Your attack damage, a magic spell, the reach of your weapon? You can only change your loadout when resting at a bench, and this is good because having too much freedom with this sort of thing can kind of trivialize the game. That's one of my few complaints with Breath of the Wild. I love that game to death, but I always found it odd how in the middle of a fight you can just pause the game and get a full heal, buff your damage, equip new weapons, toggle certain abilities, all while time is frozen and nothing can happen to you. In Hollow Knight, once you've made your decision about which charms you're using, that's it. If you die, it could be a skill issue, but it could also be a strategy issue. Perhaps you didn't pick the right tools for the job and it's time to sit down, go back to the drawing board, think, and reevaluate your build. You might find a charm that you've previously overlooked could come in handy at an unexpected time. For example, take this boss, these fucking roly-poly-oly armadillo bros over here. I realized that I never had quite enough time to heal. This mofo would always jump my nuts right when I was trying to get a heal off. He was onto me like a fucking salamander on a rock. Whatever that means. But then I remembered I had a charm that decreases healing time slightly. I would either have to overcharm or sacrifice one of my offensive spells to equip it. Did I really want to unequip Mark of Pride, the most badass charm in the game? But I deemed it to be worth the trade-off because I was taking hits, and being able to squeeze a bit more juice into that heal window was a game changer that helped me make short work of this boss. Now, I already know what some of you may be thinking. Well, you basically just cheesed the boss by using a charm that makes it easier because you didn't have the skill to beat it. And if that's you, you're absolutely wrong, and you don't understand video games, okay? You just don't. You don't get it, and I can't help you with that. Sorry. Look, obviously raw skill is awesome, but players should also absolutely be rewarded for zooming out, thinking strategically, and making decisions that help their odds. You know, strategy, game sense, and decision-making are important parts of any game, not just skill. If the developers put an item in the game, they want you to use it. You should be taking every advantage you can get. Unless you're trying to go for a challenge run or a charmless speed run or something, but on your first playthrough, the game is encouraging you to experiment with all these things, and I simply find that fun as hell. I've seen some people get annoyed that you find charms that you'll never end up using. And again, I find this criticism absurd because this happens in like any game. You know, in Castlevania, Diablo, Skyrim, Elden Ring, just about any game I've ever played, 90% of the weapons I find I'll never touch. You know, in Elden Ring, I find a bunch of summons that I just never use. It's not like I have all the summons activated simultaneously all the time. That would just be ridiculous and stupid. Wait a minute. Oh. It's also worth noting that in addition to the charms, Hollow Knight also has a full roster of normal upgrades like the dash, the wall jump, dream nail, damage, health, and soul upgrades, new special attacks and combos, etc. If you take the charms and the standard upgrades together, this game hits you with the good stuff pretty steadily throughout its runtime. Not to mention, throughout the game you find more notches, which allows you to equip more charms at once. So by the late game, you can put together these vicious charm combos, and it feels so rewarding and liberating to finally be able to rock all the charms you want in this massive heavy-hitting loadout going into the end. And some of those endgame charms are just insane. So I find this system rewarding and fun. I don't have any issue at all. And once again, other Metroidvanias are no different. Blasphemous took inspiration from Hollow Knight and uses the exact same system, but with less interesting upgrades. And Bloodstained has about 1 million weapons you'll never use. Now you could say, once again, look at our golden boy, good old Axiom Verge. That game has like 20 unique weapons that you can cycle to at any time. That should be the golden standard. And yo, I agree, okay? Games should strive to have this many awesome weapons. Axiom Verge is sick as fuck. But when it comes down to it, if we're talking Axiom Verge, like the charms, a lot of those weapons are useless and you'll just use them once then never touch them again. Like, let's not pretend in this game once you're fully powered up you're actually cycling between 20 weapons. I know you're just rocking the Kilver and the Red Coat this entire game, biatch. The Kilver and the Red Coat, it's all you need, baby. As for Hollow Knight, overall I was never wanting for more and I think it does a solid job in the upgrades department. The only thing I don't like is how they made the compass that shows you where you are on the map a charm. Having to waste a notch slot just to see where you are on the map is frankly fucking stupid. But otherwise, great upgrades in this game. Okay, next up. The third critique I've seen come up a couple times is that Hollow Knight's map is too big and is poorly designed. While fans of the game marvel at the sheer scale of Hollow Knight's world and how vast and expansive it is to explore, critics would argue that bigger isn't necessarily better, and that dragging your way across this massive map takes too long and gets tedious as the game goes on. The map being too big is one part of their argument, and the second part is that it's poorly designed because it gives the player way too many options as to where they're supposed to go, leading them to wander aimlessly without intention. In most Metroidvanias, while the world does look big and expansive, the developers have carefully upgraded most areas so that the player is pretty limited in where they can actually go. But Hollow Knight is one of those games that shatters this convention, because as soon as you drop down into the Forgotten Crossroads, there actually are different ways you can go. Some of them are gated off until you find the required upgrade, but others remain open and will take you to totally different areas of the world. While it's great that this game actually allows the player to explore freely, the critics argue it can actually lead to problems that are confusing and frustrating and cause the player to miss important areas. For example, our dear gamer can see two paths they can take and decide to take the path on the left, which ends up going on forever and ever and leading into the next few hours of the game. But if they had checked the path on the right, they would have found an extremely useful shop that can't be found anywhere else, which they now don't even know exists as they dive deeper and deeper into the game. You do find a tram system for fast travel, but the tram stations are few and far between, which means that even when fast traveling to the nearest possible location to where you want to go, you still have to run like a ways, man. You have to trek to actually get there. You spend a lot of time in this game just running through previous areas over and over, even by the standards of a Metroidvania. This gets worse later when the Forgotten Crossroads gets infected, and the developers made the horrible decision of blocking off entire paths, so you'll be trying to get somewhere and the path is sealed off and you have to run all the way around. Metroid Prime Echoes did the same thing, where entire paths would just be blocked off in the Dark World, so you'd have to trek back to a portal to go back to the Light World to find another portal just to go around. It's so annoying. If any developers out there are watching this, listen up, okay? Don't pointlessly block off parts of the map with goo in a Metroidvania. This shit is annoying, okay? Enough. If it isn't clear by my tone, this is the one criticism of Hollow Knight that I actually agree with, partially at least. It isn't a game breaker for me, but replaying the game recently, I do very much see why parts of this criticism totally hold up in my opinion. I don't have a problem with the size of the world. I love how big and vast it is. I also love how the player can actually explore and isn't upgrade gated into one set path all the time. So in those two respects, I disagree with the criticism, but there are some good points made here as well. I do think it's way too easy for players to miss legitimately important areas, like the Grub Daddy over here, or certain shops, or the guy who buys all your trinkets for Geo, and I feel like the game could have easily rectified this such that if the player misses one of these important areas, maybe just add a quick line of dialogue the next time they meet Cornifer, where he can just say, "Oh, I heard about this shop," and marks it on the map.
Oh, 真着啦。
Oh, and another thing that pisses me off! Whenever you die in Hollow Knight, you lose half of your soul power. In order to get it back, you need to trek back to the place where you died and kill your shade. This idea, frankly, sucks. It's another criticism of Hollow Knight that I actually agree with. It's trying too hard to be Dark Souls, but it doesn't really work here. Sometimes you die and you just want to go somewhere else, try another direction. This massive map is literally designed to encourage the player to explore and try different routes. The pointless necessity to have to go back to where you died just to kill this thing in 2 hits so that you can play the game is just a waste of time in a Metroidvania of this scale. Blasphemous did it too. It's just pointless. It's pointless. It worked in Dark Souls because when you die, you lose currency. And then if you die again, you lose it forever. So it ups the stakes by giving you one devil's chance to take back what you lost, but you could also just not do that, forget about it, and move on with your life. But in Hollow Knight and Blasphemous, you literally have to go back to where you died, because if you don't, you're handicapped and can't cast any spells. But it's a Metroidvania! What if I die and I want to explore another part of the map? It's stupid! Thankfully, there is a house in Dirtmouth where a lady can summon your shade back to you, but it requires a key that can be wasted on a bunch of other doors. I know the shade is a part of the lore and theme of the game, but the mechanic sucks. It looks like they'll be doing something similar again in Silksong, but hopefully it's implemented better this time. Another problem I had revisiting the game is the distance between tram stations. I think there should have been at least 4 more tram stations, especially in large areas that you commonly revisit. With that said, there is one crazy twist here. One of the optional upgrades in this game is the Dream Gate. To get this, you have to fight these optional dream bosses, and it's pretty tough, but it allows you to drop a portal that you can teleport back to at any time. I would just leave one in Queen's Cross Station so that I can always get back to a tram when I need to. This item is so useful that I almost wish it was a mandatory item that you get halfway through the game, as being able to teleport to a set spot really helps to reduce that late game tedium. But on the other hand, the fact that it's optional is kind of a win for Hollow Knight, because it's such a great way to reward the player for fighting the dream bosses and challenging themselves. So yeah, I don't know, I'm 50-50 on this whole map thing. I love the scale of the map and the freedom it provides, but they could have tightened things up a bit to prevent tedium and the player missing key locations and characters. I'm curious to see how Silksong handles this one, and also what you guys think about this one down in the comments. Okay, so that was one critique I kind of understand. Now let's get back to a criticism I've seen come up in almost every anti-Hollow Knight video I've seen that I totally disagree with, and this is concerning its difficulty. There are 2 main arguments here depending on the critic. Basically, some say the game is too hard, others say it's too easy. I can refute both of these arguments. Let's start with the criticism that the game is too hard. In other words, I've seen some people say that the game throws the player into situations that are too hard and they can get stuck, and also that the basic navigation through the map is too challenging because even basic enemies are too hard to fight. I disagree. This is a pretty tough game, but anyone can beat it. The controls are tight and it is forgiving. More importantly, if you find yourself in a tough area and get stuck, you have 3 options. You could, of course, just grind it out and beat the boss. Video games have always been like this since time immemorial. Or you can go back to the drawing board and check your charms. As mentioned before, you can usually find some way to get an advantage. Or, crazy one for you, you could just leave. As mentioned in the previous section, unlike many other Metroidvanias, Hollow Knight is a truly open and non-linear experience. If you get completely stuck, you can just go somewhere else, power up, and come back many hours later to finish off that tough boss. There's gonna be somewhere on the map you didn't check out, so you can do a million other things, and by the time you come back with more charms and a powered up nail, it'll be easy. You always have the choice to grind out a challenge or go do something else. Unless you fall into the deep nest, but I digress. The game gives you so many options to play the game your own way, so the difficulty really comes down to how you approach the game. And on top of that, nothing in the base game is that gruelingly hard. If you just want to find the 3 dreamers and beat the game, it has a very moderate difficulty. This is something I could have beaten even as a little kid. I was playing way harder games than base game Hollow Knight when I was a little kid. The real crazy challenges in this game are the dream bosses, and they're all entirely optional. In this sense, when you're fighting a challenging boss like the Broken Vessel, you're actually already playing on easy mode. Hard mode is when you go back and hit the boss with a dream nail and fight the hard version, Lost Kin. Lost Kin is way harder than the base fight, but it's also optional, so if you don't like crazy challenges, you can just opt out entirely. I don't believe there's ever any reason to get mad when an optional boss is super hard. Go see my Millennia video if you want to hear me yap more about that. Between the fact that the most brutal gauntlets in this game are optional, and even the mandatory main game challenges can be made easier with certain badges, or just avoided until you're way stronger, I don't think it's reasonable to say that this game is too hard. Now, this leads to the other side of the argument, which is that the game is too easy for precisely this reason. Joseph Anderson in particular pointed out that he felt cheated by some of the late game bosses, because by this point he had explored the map and had a bunch of charms and a fully upgraded nail, which he felt trivialized what would have been fun and intense fights. He wanted a challenge, but he felt he was robbed of one by powering up. And to that I would say, well, yeah, no shit. Fully upgrading your nail requires you to explore the entire map and find all 6 pieces of pale ore. These are scattered across this vast world and are hard as shit to find and are usually gatekept by some challenging boss or puzzle. Just knowing where they are is very difficult, and finding all 6 of them is a deliberate decision you would have to make, knowing that it's going to power up your nail, thereby making your character stronger and the game easier. If you've taken it upon yourself to do this and fully upgrade your weapon, then of course the late game boss bosses are going to be way easier than if you don't. That's literally the point of fully upgrading your weapon and is the bedrock of every game in this genre. Even in Super Metroid, if you went out of your way in the base game to find every energy tank and missile expansion, it's going to make the final boss way easier than if, for example, you're speedrunning to the end. That's how Metroidvanias reward players for exploring. That's how they're designed. If you value challenging boss fights in combat over the overall reward of getting stronger and blasting through the late game, you might be better off taking a speedrun approach where you play through the game as fast as possible and avoid these sorts of upgrades. But yeah, if you're 100%ing the game and fully upgrading your nail, the late game's gonna get easy as fuck. And look, I will admit that even without full upgrades, the final bosses aren't that hard, but that's just the thing. Hollow Knight is a pretty misunderstood game. A lot of people like to think of it in their heads as this grueling gauntlet. It's like Dark Souls but in 2D, but that isn't entirely true. The game has grueling challenges, but the core experience, the base game, is pretty accessible to your average gamer. It's not supposed to be this brutally hard game just to complete. With that said, whether people say the game is too hard or too easy, I fully disagree with this criticism on all counts. Hollow Knight has perfect difficulty balancing. The game has the perfect amount of challenge from start to finish for players of all ages and skill levels without relying on a difficulty select screen. It's perfect. Finally, our last widely and erroneously cited problem with this game is regarding its pacing. You know, I love pacing. I've had a thing or two to say about pacing, I dare say. When it comes to Hollow Knight, what people are criticizing is what I refer to as the high-level pacing. That is, the overall breakdown of the game and how much time it takes to get through each area, how frequently the player is rewarded with new upgrades and abilities, etc. The basic idea here is that the critics are saying the game simply has too much. The map is too big, the areas take too long to get through, and there aren't enough upgrades or enough variety to keep the player engaged, as it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I actually have a friend who tried playing Hollow Knight twice, and both times he loved it when it started. He was super hooked, texting us like, "Oh, this is the best game ever." Then a few weeks later, he would just get bored and stop playing. We'd ask him why, and he'd be like, "I don't know, I just played the game and got bored at some point." Now, personally, I don't understand this at all. I think it's completely batshit insane. When I play Hollow Knight, I literally cannot peel myself away from it until I finish it off. Pause. But the fact that so many players get bored does suggest that perhaps the pacing is a bit rough, as it only has 12 mainline upgrades which are spread pretty far apart. In the time in between, there's a lot of walking and exploring, which some players may like, but others may feel goes on for too long. The game is absolutely huge after all, and if people think it overstays its welcome, I understand that, I guess. On the other hand, though, the game actually isn't that long. If you just want to beat it, pause, and not find all the secrets and collectibles, all you have to do is find the 3 dreamers, who are clearly marked on your map, beat them, then beat the final boss. This can all be done in around 20 to 25 hours of playtime, which isn't my idea of too long for a Metroidvania. It only gets super long and drags on if you're being a completionist, and that's up to you. So, while I understand the issue, I broadly don't agree with it and can't relate to it, personally. If you want an example of a game that actually has bad pacing because it drags on for too long, look no further than Alien Isolation. This game should have been one of the best horror games of all time. The first 5 to 10 hours of this game are magic, but then you start to figure out how the game works, how the enemies and the alien can be dealt with, and it proceeds to go on for another 20 fucking hours. I am not joking, this is like a 30-hour game of sneaking past an alien that runs its premise so deep into the ground it's hitting fucking pre-Cambrian rock. It's hitting Satan in the 7th circle of hell. Jesus. Compared to that, Hollow Knight's not that big of a deal, and for me at least, the gameplay was so fun and addicting that I just wolfed this entire game and was ready for seconds. I acknowledge it does have some pacing issues, like the lousy tram system and backtracking I mentioned earlier, but that wasn't nearly bad enough to make me ever want to stop playing. But I guess for this one, we'll just say it's a subjective matter and leave it at that. So yeah, that's my defense of Hollow Knight. I hope you guys enjoyed this, but I'm also open to criticism, so let me know where you agree or where you disagree in the comments. Also, let me know if I missed anything. I know there are more critiques I didn't talk about, because you can't cover everything, right? Like, some people might just really hate this one boss, or think this item is a ripoff of the Shine Spark, or just really hate this NPC for some reason.
Zupa ela merma.
I don't know, but these are the 5 big critiques I found, and those were my thoughts on them. To end this one, I'll just show you the 5 main arguments one last time, transition to my thoughts on them, then you'll see links to my other videos pop up at some point and block the text. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace!